This project is made possible by support from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Missouri Arts Council, and the Kansas City Art Institute.
Welcome to the Mother Ann podcast, where women who are both artists and mothers discuss their diverse experiences as creators and caregivers. I'm Eleanor Lynn Midyett, project manager and co-curator of the Mother Ann Project and assistant professor of liberal arts at the Kansas City Art Institute. I'm also the mother of 4 sons. Each episode features discussions with artists and other individuals involved in the Mother Ann exhibition, which runs from September 5th to November 21st, 2025 at the Leedy-Voulkos Art Center in Kansas City, Missouri. The exhibit and the podcast disrupt preconceived notions that parenthood diminishes one's artistic practice and celebrate motherhood as a source of expansive creative potential.
It feels like in both the art world and in academia, if you are not just this machine for this sole vocation, you are seen as less than, divided time, won't be as successful. And that's ridiculous because I have become a much more complex, rich, I have more to offer.
In this episode, I speak with artist mother Julie Farstad.
I am a professor of painting and social practice here at the Kansas City Art Institute, where I have been teaching for 20 years. And I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Notre Dame and my graduate degree at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So that's my kind of academic background, and I am a painter and social practice artist, and my work spans winter sowing native plants and giving them away at public events and doing murals in the community. So I say I do inside paintings and outside paintings, right? Some of my inside paintings are things that I would show in an art gallery. And then my outside paintings are murals and public workshops. Yeah, I like phrasing it that way, inside painting and outside painting.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So you really have a diverse practice then. Could you talk about what stage of parenting you're in right now?
Sure.
And your children?
Yes. Right now, I have a 14-and-a-half-year-old son named Gustavo and an 8-and-a-half-year-old son named Mateo. And it's interesting to have 2 kids at 2 very different stages. I have very intense, focused children. My oldest is an athlete and just completely focused on soccer. That is his art form. And then my youngest is an artist and scientist. And I think it's really important to go in the weeds a little bit, to validate kids' interests and not say, like, what are you going to be when you grow up? It's like, what are you now? What are you curious about now? So I love that my youngest always said that, I'm an artist. And now he says, I'm an artist and I'm a scientist. And I'm like, yeah, you are. So just validating. My oldest gets really embarrassed when I say that he's like an elite athlete. But he spends hours every day working out. He does his own training. He's on several teams. He refs. He does coaching. So they're both very dedicated and self-disciplined. And I hope that's something that they have seen in me and picked up on.
Yeah, I'm glad that you talk about that, just kind of being a role model for your children. A lot of my conversations with artist mothers focuses on this concept of the ethics of parenting. It's how you want to guide your children through the world, but then it also informs the artist's studio practice, but also it also influences how you yourself navigate life in this world.
One of the things that popped into my head when you said that was it starts with not thinking about children as they're not people you own. They're not property. They're your children, but they're not carbon copies of you. I think that I'm here to nurture them, tend to them so they can be who they are, not be who I want them to be. And I think that there's something really similar in my work as a gardener, really invested in native landscapes, and as a painter as well. Like, at a certain point, you have to give up control and embrace what is there. You make a mark in a painting, and you could think that that mark is supposed to go and develop into, I paint plants, right? So I could think, okay, yeah, that's going to be part of that leaf. But I can also think that I can respond to that in a different way. That's an opportunity. Everything is an opportunity to experiment and play. And so allowing myself to lose control and to embrace that and to watch my children emerge and to be curious about who they are and who they want to be, and see how can I nurture those things. Like, if one of my kids is really curious about movement, right? My older child experiences the world through movement. It's like, how many different ways can I give him that experience, and can I validate that that's important?
Yeah, so because your practice focuses on native plants and the stewardship of the land and of nature, and then also it sounds like what you're talking about with your children is, they're not your property, but then they're a gift, and you're tending to them too. I definitely see the relationship there. How intentional have you been about introducing them to art and taking them into your studio?
Completely intentional, and it's almost unavoidable, because there have been many times where my studio is the dining room table. And so they're just hanging out watching me make a painting. Or when Gustavo was born, I had a studio at Studios Inc. And so I just brought him with me and put a blanket on the floor and would work in the studio. And they've been the subject of my work a lot too. So they see me working on portraits of them. They also see me documenting them, taking their photos. And it's so funny because my oldest knows when I'm taking a photo for reference material, and he'll stop smiling because he knows I don't want them smiling, because I feel like that's creepy in a painting and looks unnatural. So he'll immediately stop smiling, and he'll kind of like not pose artificially, but he'll pose in a way that it's like, oh, I know you wanted to get me doing this gesture, which is really funny. So it's kind of like become part of, his experience of childhood. They've both grown up having me paint their portraits and exhibit their portraits, and walking into a room and seeing pictures of themselves on the walls and all over our house. That's really normal to them. And I want them to feel like it's not other to them. Even if they are not artists, I want them to feel like they are not outside of art. Like, we all get to experience art, and we all can be subjects of art. We can all be art makers, and we can all be art viewers. And my youngest, Mateo, loves to come to the studio with me now. He will bring markers, and he loves to make digital collages on the iPad. He loves being in the studio. He loves when he has a snow day or a day off and has to come to work at KCAI with me, because he once told me, he goes, Mom, I love coming to your school because everyone here has art in their brains. And I was like, dude, that's beautiful. I love that about it too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's just part of what they've experienced. And I think the most important part of that, well, two things, that they know you can make something out of nothing, and you can make something magical out of nothing. And then the second is that I want them to see me involved in the world. I don't want them to only experience me as their mother. I want them to see me as a full person. And so just like I come to their games or whatever, I tell them, you're coming to my show. Like, you might not be interested in art, but in this family, we're going to support each other. And so this is part of me, and you're going to come, and they love it.
So there really aren't any demarcations or borders then. So it's soccer field, art studio, classroom, world, so that it all flows naturally in together then. How do you feel that exposing them to art has impacted how they interact in the world and how they see the world, particularly with nature, I think, in this concept of stewardship and a responsibility maybe to take care of nature or take care of others?
That's a really good question. And I hope they see that we are part of nature. We are part of the ecosystem, and we have an obligation to leave it better than we left it, to be, there's a reason that humans have this ability to distinguish one plant from another, one animal from another. And I think I've been trying to figure out, what is our role? And I think that tending is our role. Humans can identify when a tree is sick or when there's an invasive plant in the yard, right? And so we have those abilities, and I want them to see that we're part of the ecosystem. The Blue River is not just a thing on a map, right? That we need that to survive. And so we're going to go hiking there, and we're going to go look and see what lives there and realize that we need this to survive. We need the oxygen, we need the water. And I want it to be a place of solace, that when there's stuff going on in the world, I want it to be a place where they can feel connection. And I think that being a mother and feeling connection with your mother is so important to feeling safe and secure. And I want them to sort of transfer that feeling with me to nature. This is morbid, but during COVID, we were all talking about death, and we don't not talk about death in our family. And Mateo was playing a lot of Minecraft, and he was wondering if there were zombies in the cemetery near us. And I was like, let's go find out. And so we drove in there, and my oldest son was like, this is really sad. I feel like we shouldn't be here. And my youngest was like, is that a portal to heaven? Is that where the zombies are? And it was really, they're totally in two different places. And we walked around a little bit, and we looked at the dates, and I said, look around at this place. I was like, there's just grass and then these stones, and I don't want to be here. I said, someday I'm going to die. And I hate thinking about it. I'm terrified of not being able to raise my kids. That's my biggest fear. And I said, when I die, I want to be like sprinkled on the prairie. And I want you to know that I am there. And I want you to think of me when you see nature and feel connected there, because that's the essence of feeling grounded, right? And so I want them to make that transfer. And so when they're adults and they're going through something, they can take a hike and feel reconnected and feel grounded. That's my hope.
Yeah, so that I feel like there's a real connection there of just how you see the world, and then how you want your kids to be connected to the world, and comforting too. I think that death can be such a scary thing, and so for you to say, okay, we're all part of this cycle in nature is a really comforting thing. Tell me about what you're working on recently. I know we had talked about funeral portraits for rare plants, and so I feel like that kind of relates to this idea of death, but then also in a very naturalistic way.
I'm on a side quest within that project right now, where I started working on black paper, thinking about death. And I started painting flowers and plants using water-based materials. And it started to remind me of the night sky. And I thought about how the prairie, which is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the world, right? There's more diversity within like a 3-foot square of a prairie than the Brazilian rainforest. Now, partially that's probably due to trees being bigger. So I was looking at my paintings and they started looking like the night sky. So I started adding in some metallic paint and glitter paint and thinking about how looking down into the prairie was like looking up at the night sky, and how these were both reflections of the cosmos. Each of them feels like this endless sight of wonder. So that's kind of where I am in that project is, and this happens all the time, where you start something and you think it's going to be one thing, and then, you know, I'm hanging out with my kids and we're talking about Star Wars and the planets, and I realize, oh my God, I'm making these paintings of the prairie that I thought were about this one thing, but they look like outer space, like Star Wars, like this plant is like a galaxy, and then it goes in another direction. And I think that one of the most important things, to go back to the ethics of motherhood a little bit, that this makes me think of, is the importance of wonder and making space for wonder. So if I find myself in that space with my artwork or with my kids or in nature, that's the sweet spot. And I feel like I have to like just be open and not force it to be something else, but just to like welcome that sort of wonder in and see where it can go.
Yeah, I see how your children have really been an inspiration. Being a mother, that experience has really been an inspiration for sort of just going with the flow and not having these rigid expectations, but letting that creative imagination go. So, I mean, do you feel like that's really rooted in being a mother? I mean, were you always that kind of a person, do you think, kind of more, I mean, as an artist, just open to that imagination and imaginative flow, or do you feel like your children really opened you to that?
They definitely did. No, I was not. I never felt creative or imaginative at all, which is really weird for an artist to say. But I think I also am not one of those people that can see images in their head. And so I thought that meant I wasn't creative. I didn't have an imagination. I could imagine things, but it wasn't visual, if that makes any sense. But having children and having to, just as you're raising kids, improvise, but also seeing how fearlessly creative they are, right? Like how a pile of leaves becomes a mountain. Or when my son Mateo is drawing, he's not like, you know, thinking about, oh, did I do this explosion right? He's thinking about, how do explosions feel and what do they do? And so thinking about what things should look like or what's the correct way really got bulldozed in such a good way. And I started to just admire how brave they were. Like when I see my oldest son, Gustavo, take a penalty kick, like I would throw up. I would absolutely throw up. And he walks out there and kind of like hops and puts the ball down and goes for it. And he doesn't think about anything other than like, I'm going upper left, like I'm doing this. And so I definitely think that having children has completely changed the kind of artist I am. Then there's also the practicalities of being an artist and being interrupted constantly, right? Like you can't demand a kind of technical perfection in a way when you know that you've got to pick somebody up from practice at this time and this person needs your help doing this, and you're not going to have that kind of control over your time or your materials. I've had to change materials. When Gustavo was little, I started working with fabric because it was non-toxic. So I was making embroidery and quilting because I could pick it up and put it down. With Mateo, I started doing more watercolor and gouache because of the same reasons. And so
improvisation.
Yes, exactly. Improvisation and being open to being like, okay, I got interrupted during this thing. Was making this mark. I was thinking it was going to be this one thing. Coming back to it allows me a second chance. And I kind of like that. Sometimes I feel like artists need to give themselves like time away from their work, and then I always feel like I need to like sneak up and be surprised by it, to see it new and think like, oh, actually, this is telling me something else. And can I be curious about what it's telling me and go in a new direction, as opposed to having to like control it? I think you just, like, being a parent, you realize you can't control your kids, right? Like, try to go to the store when your kid's cranky and tired, and it's just not going to work out, right? So it's like just giving up on all that and just being like, this could be an opportunity for something else.
Right. So as a parent, just leaning into the unexpected and then seeing where it takes you, and then also as an artist, taking that and running with it too. How do you bring that to your teaching then? So you're with your kids, and then you're also in the studio in painting with your students. How does that translate to your teaching and trying to give some of that freedom of expression and freedom to fail to your students?
So yeah, that's interesting. It's something that I really try to do. And one thing that's been super important to me in that is learning how to get students to feel safe with me. And I don't know if I'm always successful, but I try as much as possible, because so many of our students come to us in their like fight or flight brain. They are very stressed out, or they've been through a lot of trauma. They're trying to figure out who they are. And so I learned some skills called parent-child interactive therapy when we had a foster son for a year. It was about 9 years ago. And part of having our foster son was going to weekly therapy. And so they taught us these skills for PCIT. And it was so cool because they would put like, the therapist would sit behind like a one-way mirror, or is it a one? I don't know, what do you call it? You can't see in, they can see you. And you have a headphone, an earpiece in. And there's a way that you play with the child where it's all child-led. And you practice these pride skills, PRIDE. So you're praising them constantly. And these are all designed to help bring a student out of their limbic brain, or the child, but I use them for students, out of their limbic brain where they're terrified of my judgment, they're terrified of each other's judgment, failure, and all this stuff, to bring them into their prefrontal cortex where they can feel safe, where they can make decisions, where they can try things. So you do things like you praise them. So I try to come into their studio and say like, oh my gosh, I love what you're working on. Look at this amazing color, right? Like, or like, wow, you're so organized. And then R is reflection. So if they're saying something, you're reflecting back. I is imitation. So like when you're with little kids, if they're like making a car go vroom, then you make your car go vroom. If a student is making a gesture with their hand, like, oh, I don't, I'm painting like this, you kind of imitate that, or you reflect their body language in some way so that the mirror neurons like synchronize. Describe. This one's a really good one. And kids love this. When you're playing with them and you describe what they're doing, it just like fills their love bucket. And so they can be playing, you can be like, oh, you're pushing the car like that, and you're crashing it so forcefully into that, and look at how you're creating this excitement. Or if they're playing with Play-Doh, oh, you're using your soft hands to make such a gentle form. So I try to describe with my students what I see them doing. Oh, you're folding the paper and you're doing it in such an interesting way. So they know I see them.
Yeah,
it
validates what they're doing.
And then the last thing you do is enjoyment. And this is so important. Like, I feel like I always want my kids to know that they are a source of joy. And so when you're done doing this interaction, you say like, oh, I had such a great time with you. So with my students, I try to say like, I really enjoyed talking to you about your work today. Keep it up. This is really great. I love that you're in this class. So I try to do this so that they can find the studio to be a safe place. Mm-hmm. And that takes a while. And then I start to encourage them to play and be curious and trust themselves.
So it's really dismantling this hierarchical paradigm of our professor as the expert and then the students as the pupils then who are just attentively listening and watching and mimicking. But you really are giving them a lot more agency then to be themselves and to feel more comfortable. Do you have like any memory or anecdote of like when you really saw that it worked, or that you really got through?
That's a really good question. I just got a note from a senior who graduated who told me that they loved having me as a sophomore professor because they felt seen by me. And their work was very different from what other students were doing. And they felt like they were the only Jewish student in the class. And they felt like, they felt different. And because I was genuinely interested in what they were doing, because they were awesome at what, they were devoted to it, but because every week I came in, and even if the work looked awkward, that's great. Like that means something's happening, right? There's something going on. And I just wanted them to keep trusting that they knew who they were and what they were interested in, and that was valid and exciting. And so it just felt so good to like get that thank you card and to know that they felt seen and valued. That was really, really important.
Thank you and gratitude, for sure.
The hard part is when students actually reject this method, because they have internalized patriarchy. They have internalized elitism. I tell my students that our classroom is an ecosystem, and I am not here to be the tallest tree in the room. I am the mycelium. I am underground. I am feeding you. I want to send you, in different artists to look at and ideas to think about. And here's a cool color. And have you tried this brush? And, you should connect with this person. I am not here to shade you. I'm here to connect you to this rich world so that you can grow to be who you want to be and make the art you want to make. Some students really love this, and other students are like, I just want you to tell me what to do. And that's really hard. Some students feel like they're not learning if they're not being lectured at, and if they're not feeling kind of stupid and crappy about themselves. And I am not here to make someone feel stupid. I want to nurture everybody and have them all nurture each other. And so, some students really thrive in that environment. It makes some students really confused. And I explain to them what I'm doing. Like, this is not a secret of that this is how I teach. But some students still really value the kind of authoritative force feeding of information. And I try to use a lot of like natural metaphors in there just to get the idea across. But it's like, let's decompose that. Let's compost that idea.
Yeah,
and they're like,
that's a good idea.
God.
I'm a big believer in that in parenting. Is lots of times students and your children don't always seem receptive to your approach, but that let it germinate a little bit, and then somehow later on, sometimes it comes back and they're more accepting of it. So I appreciate how you've implemented this parent-child interactive therapy, a parenting approach into your teaching. I think it's important to have role models in the classroom and at the level of higher education for our students to show them that being an artist mother is possible. Did you have role models when you were growing up or when you were going through your education that impacted you and who you wanted to emulate and inspired you to be an educator?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I was at Notre Dame, one of my painting professors, Maria Tomasula, was new at Notre Dame, and being her student was like a paradigm shift. She had 2 young children right when she came in, and she's an amazing painter. She's so smart. Her work was about family. And she was so open with me about all of those things. And I was really struggling financially at the time. And so she hired me as her nanny and her studio assistant. Maria Tomasula got me through undergrad, like no doubt got me through undergrad. And so I would come to her house and babysit her kids. And I would see, it was funny because Maria would go out the front door and tell her kids, okay, bye, mom's going to work. And then she would go around to the back door and go into her studio, where her studio was. Mm-hmm. And she totally got away with this for years. And I would watch the kids, and she would stay in there, and she was working. And she knew she had this tiny, couple hours. I could see the way that she was creating this life of painting and motherhood. And she had her ear. She could tell when the baby was crying. She could tell like if things were going off the rails, right? And the baby just needed to be nursed. But seeing that she would get down on the floor and play with her kids, and then she'd be bringing her kids to the opening. And at the same time, she was reading just the smartest books and engaged in these amazing conversations. I didn't know. I had been told by several people that if you want to be an artist, you cannot have children. After I graduated, I even had an art dealer that represented me, and when I got pregnant, he told me, well, I'm not pushing your work anymore because you're not going to be able to produce.
I've heard that a lot, actually. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, and I was just like, are you kidding me? I immediately left that gallery and called 2 women who run a gallery, and I was like, listen. But I've even had colleagues here, when I announced that I was pregnant with Mateo, who jokingly said, well, how are you going to prevent this from happening next time? And I was like, what? I had another colleague when we started fostering a child who came up and said, I didn't know you liked kids this much. And it was just like really interesting how it feels like in both the art world and in academia, if you are not just this machine for this sole vocation, you are seen as less than, divided time, won't be as successful. And that's ridiculous because I have become a much more complex, rich, I have more to offer. I believe it's all because these systems grew out of the monastery, right? Okay. This was a male European monastery situation where you were taken care of by the church and you painted your manuscripts or were writing your philosophy books, right? It was monastic, and it was part of that. And it was misogynistic, and I feel like a lot of people still hold on to this and are either passive aggressive about it or give you these platitudes or are outwardly hostile.
Right. I really do believe that paradigm of the male artist who suffers for his art and will do anything, and closes himself off, to this rich emotional life is that traditional paradigm. But I appreciate that you're breaking that, and you're saying that we can integrate all these various facets of our life and be artist, mother, citizen of the world.
Yeah. So if I could jump in real quick about that, one of the things that, not to be so nature nerdy, but it's like having a mental monocrop, right? Like you're just growing one thing in your brain. And I think that that's part of this malignant Western culture that we've developed, right? And so using natural metaphors has helped me so much in parenting and teaching and in breaking down white supremacy culture and patriarchy. Is I see that attitude as being this really entitled male kind of heroic narrative about the one who's going to teach you everything and learn everything. And what we need is a new narrative that's about community and diversity and working together. So yeah, I'm down with mental monocropping.
Yeah, down with mental monocropping. Absolutely. Well, I actually feel like when we first talked about the Mother Ann project and exhibition, I felt like you were so supportive. I mean, speaking of community oriented, what were you thinking when I approached you about that idea?
Oh, I just was so excited because I had been researching a lot about artists and motherhood, and I had recently done a talk at the Museum of Motherhood in New York about my work, and I was hungry for more information. And I had like the librarian at our school trying to find more information, more catalogs, and we were having trouble. And I just felt like institutionally we were fighting for like parental leave and just like a place if you need to like nurse your child. And the visibility and the validation within our school culture was so necessary because it still feels like this thing that you're supposed to keep invisible, and it needs to be seen as a strength. We have this experience. There's so few of us on the faculty who have children.
Mm-hmm. It's still just a handful, I feel like.
Yes.
Or just, not. It is a very small number. And I remember stories of people saying when they had to nurse their babies, they had to find a bathroom in Foundation, and they just would sit on the toilet and nurse their baby really quickly. So what you said about invisibility really rings true. I think the project Mother Ann really celebrates artist mothers and their accomplishments, but they have been invisible, in the art world and on campus too, and so it's nice to be able to celebrate them.
Sometimes I've had the experience of like bringing my children to end of the semester shows, and you can tell in some spaces you walk into with certain members of the community that they are not cool with it, and other people who are totally cool with it, and it just needs to be normalized that mothers are part of our community and they have something amazing to offer because we are at ground level of creativity. There's nothing more creative.
That's a great way to put it. Mothers are ground level at creativity.
Yeah, we should be celebrated for that, and not feeling like we have to hide it or apologize for it. And so sometimes I've had to bring Mateo to faculty assembly meetings. And
he is a rock star at faculty assembly. He doesn't say a word, and he just does his art. And
he busts out his 600-page sketchbook and his markers, and he's got his headphones on, and he's just drawing. And most recently, we were at a faculty assembly meeting, and I didn't have his sketchbooks, but I had my iPad, and I taught him how to really quickly make easy collages in Procreate, and he picked it up instantly and has made hundreds of Star Wars battles in Procreate. He's now making animal battles. He takes my photos of the prairie and turns them into sites of Star Wars battles, which is hilarious. So there'll be like common milkweed and like these other plants, and then there's like Darth Vader. And I love that we're kind of collaborating, and he's just like, oh yeah, my mom took a picture of that. That's mine now. So, but his presence at faculty assembly, sometimes you can't get childcare. Sometimes childcare is too expensive when your job doesn't keep up with the cost of living. Sometimes childcare or aftercare at school fills up and you just can't get a spot. And people who have children understand that we can all be flexible about that, and that children actually can be part of things and be somewhat appropriate. And he's also the future of the students who are going to come here, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like every decision made in a city, in an institution, like there should be like a child at the table, right? Like, oh, we're building a new building. let's have a child assess it, right? Yeah. Their opinions matter. Not that I feel like he needs to have opinion in faculty assembly, but his presence reminds us who we're really talking about. We can get so in our heads about like wordsmithing a stupid motion. And it's like, actually, we're trying to raise the next generation of creative people.
Right.
You know? So
That's
it's
great.
like, I don't know. It could be a reminder and not an inconvenience.
Absolutely. Just reframing the dialogue. So you've really brought it full circle, I think, in terms of your children as collaborators in your art practice, but also in your career and in your life, I think, and not having these siloed, bordered, walled off aspects of ourselves, but really integrating the whole. So, yeah, thanks so much, Julie,
thank
for
you
being
so much.
here. Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
This podcast was produced by Cleo Scroll Productions, with Kara Heitz as the director and Emily Milner as the audio engineer. Music is by Brooke Tooley and the Moon Travelers. The Mother and project team includes Eleanor Lim Midyet, project manager and co-curator, Courtney Wasson, co-curator, Laura Berman, senior consultant, Stephanie Leedy-Voulkos Art Center owner and mother of the Crossroads, Erin Woodworth, Leedy-Voulkos Gallery Manager, and Debbie Barrett-Jones, Leedy-Voulkos Gallery Assistant. An extra thank you to the Kansas City Artists Coalition, Distribution by Air Company, and Hotel Indigo for their support. Don't forget to listen to the other episodes of the Mother and podcast, and also remember to check out the Mother and exhibition, which runs from September 5th to November 21st, 2025 at the Leedy-Voulkos Art Center in Kansas City, Missouri. More information can be found on their website at www.leedy-voulkos.com. That's www.leedy-voulkos.com. Thanks for listening.